go back in time. It's 1994, I'm 20 years old, and my first temporary job, answering calls in a customer service center for a software company, has turned into my first permanent role. I'm over the moon. I don't have a degree. I was just a smart cookie in the right place at the right time. If you've ever seen the US version of The Office, it's a lot like that. There's a lot of silliness and deep friendships. I have this distinct memory of someone showing me this online bookstore, and it's called Amazon. We all watched the TV show Friends, and honestly, I recall it as a really happy time in my life. And then friends started leaving for startups. One went to Netscape, which is kind of sad because Netscape doesn't exist anymore. And another went to Amazon. So yeah, big difference. I myself left a good job to go work for a small software startup that had a California office but was based in Oxford, England, for the sole reason that I wanted to go to England. And I did. However, at 23, I got my first redundancy. It's been 30 years since my first permanent job, and in that time, I've spent a good chunk of it working in corporate environments in the US and the UK. In between, I've been freelancing and trying some self-employment pivots, and I really thought I'd crack this work-life balance. It's all been a bit messier than I would have liked. So I thought I would reflect my personal experiences working in various tech companies, in offices in the UK and the US, and what are the differences, and actually what's the same, because not enough people talk about what's the same. In the US, there's a pretty strong work ethic, or that's what we're being told, and that is true. There is an awful lot of people working overtime, putting in extra hours just to get ahead. Could also be the same in the UK too. I would be jumping on calls in the evening to overlap with people in New York and other offices. I think it really much depends on the organization. I lived with somebody who worked in the video games industry in the UK, not even London, but in somewhere else in the UK. And yeah, they were working till 2 a.m. sometimes, and it's not healthy, it's not ideal. I don't think you get the best out of people if they're working crazy hours. I just want to say that the working hours thing, it might tend to be more in the US, but don't assume that the UK never has that. In terms of career progression, I don't think I've ever cracked that. When I was younger, I never really wanted to climb the corporate ladder, and as I got older, I thought maybe I'm interested, but I just struggled. What I know now about myself is that I was undiagnosed autistic and ADHD, so the whole social relationships, navigating all of that was a little bit tricky for me. In the US, there's definitely a culture of being very visible, of almost having to sell yourself, and it can be a little bit forward, and in the UK that doesn't fly at all. So, and I should caveat this as well. Like, I've only ever worked in southern England in three different cities. So I'm not able to speak for the entire country. Yeah, in the UK it is more subtle. A lot of it is based on relationships. Well, actually in the US it's based on relationships too. I think this visibility thing really became more of an issue post-COVID when people started working from home more. I also distinctly remember coming back to the UK and having absorbed a lot of that like overconfidence and promoting yourself that I got from the US, and it did not go down very well. It didn't go down at well. So that really knocked my confidence. Don't know if I've ever gotten over that one. Now that I'm freelancing and pursuing self-employment, I work for myself and the boss is a bitch. It's a little bit looser. Obviously, the pay is not steady, which is not ideal. Okay, if it looks like I'm wiggling around a lot, I am filming in the kitchen where I'm cat sitting. It's the only place that has decent light that isn't a really horrific background. I'm thinking of my own bedroom right now. Let's see how this goes. Thanks for bearing with me. One of the other big differences in the work culture is taking time off. In the US, I had been told at various times that I could only take a week at a time, which is a huge bummer if you want to go somewhere further away, if you want to go abroad. Because of the size of the US, there's just longer distances involved. Someone on the East Coast would need to fly 10 hours to get to Hawaii, whereas London's maybe 7 hours, which is funny because sometimes you would still see Americans go over to Hawaii, but not to Europe. I have a relative who flew from California to Amsterdam for a 3-day trip, and that seems madness. But if you want to go and you don't have a lot of time off, you have to do these things, I guess. And of course, from the UK, you could go to Amsterdam for 3 hours if you really wanted to. Not that you would. So in the US, there's 0 days mandated paid time off. And it's down to the employer altogether. I knew people working in food service, they had no paid time off, and it was just sad. In the UK, it's 28 days mandatory paid time off for full-time employees, and taking holidays is expected, and they tell you don't check email. They tell you, really disconnect. I work with people that would spend more time shopping for their holiday than they would thinking about where to go and booking a 2-week holiday. Now, as a freelancer, in theory, I have unlimited time off, but every day I don't work, I don't get paid. And actually, most days I'm not getting paid anyway. It just depends on what's going on with the freelance situation. Yeah, YouTube I don't count that. It's very tiny amounts of money. There's also the concept of unlimited paid time off, which sounds kind of great in theory, but it doesn't really work out in your favor. If you don't use the time and you get made redundant or you quit, you haven't accrued anything, they don't owe you anything, and so that paid time off is gone. I think of paid time off as a definite, oh God, the sun's gone in. I think of paid time off as another form of income. Well, certainly there's been places where I was able to buy and sell PTO if I wanted to, so I would sometimes just buy the maximum, which was 5 days, and use those for just days around the house. But I suppose there might be people as well that don't think they need 28 full days, so they'll sell what they don't need and have the money in their pocket, which is kind of nice too. Tell me in the comments, what's the longest paid time off break you've had from work? And did you feel like it was worth it? Was it refreshing? Or was it too long? In terms of commuting, I don't think the US or the UK has it better than the others. One thing for sure though, in the UK, there's more chance you're going to be on public transport. So at various times in my life, I would drive to work, I would take the train, I would walk. And the best commutes for me were when I was walking. I had a 45-minute walk across Brooklyn, and then I also did a 45-minute walk when I was working in Bristol. You basically killed 2 birds with 1 stone, or 3 if you think, I don't want to deal with public transport today. In fact, in Bristol, it was really hilly. I got really fit that way. Commuting on subways and tubes is the worst experience for me personally. It's just so crowded. Even in the UK, the trains can be even in New York. I've done commuter trains in New York. It's crowded. It's uncomfortable, unless you tend to go at off-peak times. On the other hand, as a freelancer working from home, I don't get as much movement in a day. I have to make steps to get in my steps. Wait, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Whereas before, you could easily just get 7,000 steps a day getting to and from the office. I do know people that have tried to mimic their commuting walking, and so that means going out twice a day. But if you are commuting, then there's the whole question of, do you stick around to socialize? The only patterns I've seen between US and UK after-work drinks is that in the US, you're more likely to be driving afterwards, unless you're in somewhere like New York City. I was working outside of Boston, and the co-founder of the company I was working for was a European, and there was a beer tap in the office, which was really nice. And the rule was, if it was after 4 p.m., you could help yourself. And some people, oh, that seems early. Well, if you're driving, yeah, maybe you have a beer at 4 instead of 5. That same office, we had a culture of there would be games nights and things like that. And it was really, really nice. I really enjoyed that. In the UK and the places that I've worked, it's been pretty easy to grab drinks after work. Apart from once I was in a kind of slightly out of town business park. So that company, we actually did Fridays out of the office. We would have lunch and a couple of pints sometimes in nearby country pubs. Lately, I've been working in London, and I don't know if it's just age or the fact that I'm just aware of, noise and crowds. I don't want to deal with it. So, I found being in the office quite tiring, and so I would just prefer to go home. There definitely is a cultural shift away from drinks after work in London. I think a lot of the younger people aren't really that into it. So, yeah, it's just happening less frequently. But if you look, the pubs are still really busy. So I don't know if it's friends catching up, but it doesn't seem like it's colleagues as much. In my 20s, we were in the office 5 days a week. That was just how you did it. By the time I got into my 30s, it was possible to work from home. Laptops were widely available. So I think I was quite fortunate in that I was working from home at least 1 day a week from, probably my mid-30s. Moving back to the UK in my 40s, again, it was typically Fridays from home. Sometimes you could get away with 3 days in the office. And I think that feels okay. Employers are pushing for people being in the office, and I think that makes sense if all of your colleagues are in the same space as you, but there's a lot of times when your colleagues are in another location, so spending your day in the office trying to focus on video calls is not fun. My preference would be to be at home for calls whenever possible and go into the office if there was something that needed to be dealt with face-to-face. Not dealt with, that sounds... What I mean perhaps is a wider team meeting, or sometimes they had like quarterly offsites, or sometimes there would be offsite social things. And so go in for face-to-face meetings, go in for the social things. I think the problem arises when they try to treat everybody the same, and it's just not always the same. You're maybe just have a different role, Sorry, I'm slightly distracted by the flies buzzing around. No screens on windows here, people. My preference is working from the location that makes sense that I need to be in for that day, whether it's an in-person meeting, I'll go to the office. If there's something that requires some deep focus, honestly, I do love a slightly buzzy background where I can just put noise canceling headphones in and I can focus. Other times, if there's lots of calls, I want to be at home. I can get up, I can move around, I can grab breaks if there's like very tiny, tiny windows for having a break. That's perfect for being at home. So before I mentioned I lost my job, and there's something called COBRA. I'll put it on screen, but basically it's a way to continue your employer health insurance if you're in the United States. The HR person explained it to me, but it was very confusing. So I said, yeah, sure. And then I got the letter, and the amount I was going to be paying every month was ridiculous. So I think I paid for 1 month. It was huge. Also in the US, severance pay is optional. In the UK, after 2 years is a mandatory redundancy pay. I think if anything, most employers would, give you a month. And of course, if you lose your job, you still have the National Health Service as backup. So that's never a concern that, your health insurance is tied to your job. In terms of unemployment income, in the US, they do have short-term unemployment. And I think it all depends on the state, so I can't really go into detail. In the UK, you have the job seekers allowance, and they've changed it now. I think it's limited to 6 months. But for all the differences in hours and holidays and work culture, some things are exactly the same. I find that when you're leaving, that relationships definitely fade when you leave a company. Even some of the teams where we had almost a trauma bond, eventually those relationships did fade, which is really sad. I kept in touch with a lot of people for a couple of years afterwards, but yeah, it's tough. People move on. So that's, I think, the part I'm talking about. I mean, I even changed teams, and my former manager, I was like dead to her. That's tough. The friends that you make at work, usually they are just work friends. You're there because you're in a specific time and a place. And even as someone who's been an immigrant going back and forth, it's a similar thing. It's also tough when you hear of a former colleague's passing and there's no one to mourn with you on that. It's tough. Posting on LinkedIn feels very hollow. I think ultimately the hard thing is that wherever you go, you are replaceable. And that's why my idea of balance has shifted so much. My personal takeaway is that I'm still, I haven't obviously figured everything out, but my balance now is to work from anywhere. I love that I don't have to be in a specific place. I will say, though, that offices have one huge thing going for them, and that is they have comfortable furniture. Really nice ergonomic chairs, maybe an adjustable desk, always a monitor. This is my problem working as a freelancer and house sitting. I just don't know what I'm going to get. Now that I'm in my 50s, you've done the math, I don't prioritize climbing the corporate ladder at all now. I prefer to do more fulfilling work and working within my comfort zones. So that means not commuting every day. Even just getting up and getting dressed. I know this is a me thing, but it's the autism, it's the ADHD. Every step that it takes to get out the door is I have to figure it out. It doesn't come automatically. There's no ingrained habits around that, which is just how our brains work. Advice to my younger self, I would have hopefully discovered this ADHD autism thing sooner, because I might have been able to steer my career in a different direction that didn't rely on so many personal relationships and not needing to be chatty all the time. I think the challenge for everybody is to build a life outside of work, redefine success, and not be afraid to ask for what you need. I think the real measure of success is whether your work fits the life that you want to live.